What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 20. And it's kind of hard to believe that we are, 5 months in on the podcast? So that's pretty awesome. And to the few of you that regularly listen out there and tune into the show, I really do appreciate you, your support, your love, and kindness. Means a lot and kind of keeps you going in the world of content creation. Now, I'm recording this podcast a little bit early. So by the time this goes live, I'm recording the previous Wednesday morning because I'm actually last minute. The fam decided to head out of town for a getaway for a few days before the 4th of July. So that's what we're doing. So I figured I got to record early so I don't miss a show, because I could take, my recording gear, I do this on the laptop. I've got a small mixer and a mic that I do this on. So I could take it all with me, but then, we're staying with the in-laws and I don't want to just set up a recording and have it maybe not sound as good and all that stuff. So let's just knock it out now before we head out of town and do that stuff. So I'm currently enjoying a Nespresso latte that I made. It's not as good as the one I made yesterday, but it does the job. It's a beautiful morning. It's a little cooler here in the Pacific Northwest, which is kind of nice because, as I mentioned last week, we had that scorcher of a heat wave, but a little bit cooler, a little bit cloudy. That's okay. Nice cooler weather. I'm enjoying that. So things are good. I hope you're having a good week out there. Or by the time you listen to this, had a good week, played some video games, got some good gaming in. Definitely some interesting news about, there was a Nintendo Direct Mini that happened this past week that we're definitely going to talk about that a little bit. And yeah, I hope you're staying safe out there and things are going well for you. As for me, I didn't get a ton of games in, but I did get a little bit of gaming time in, so I'll talk about that when we talk about the games that we're playing. But this show will go live on the 4th of July, so if you're here in the USA, happy Independence Day, and God bless America. If you don't know what this day is about, look it up, because it is a glorious day. It is the day that we celebrate this nation's independence and this nation's birth. It's America's birthday. So I think it's important to remember that, and remember that freedom comes with a cost. But it's more than just barbecues and fireworks and family time. Those things are all great. It's about freedom. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Now, for the uninitiated or those new to the show, remember the best way you can support the show is to leave a comment if you're listening here on YouTube or the podcast, or leave us a nice rating on the podcast platform you're listening on, whether it be, Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, any of those ones. Drop a rating. Helps with the algorithms, helps people find the show, and it's much appreciated. Also, check out Locals. Check out my page on Locals, the gamesitechronicles.locals.com. You can also listen to the podcast there if you'd like. And as I mentioned, I do have a YouTube channel. I don't put a ton of content up there, but the podcast does go up there. I have a ton of old videos, as I used to do regularly YouTube videos, but I've kind of gotten into the YouTube short game. So if you're so inclined, check those out and be sure to subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And remember, new episodes of the show go live each and every week, Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, for this week's show, I kind of was kind of pulling through, possible interim topics, but I came across a couple articles about Xbox in cloud gaming, and it kind of sparked this idea around the topic of cloud gaming, and kind of gets into handheld gaming a little bit. So I want to dive into cloud and handheld gaming, the current state, and possibly the future of it, especially as it relates to Xbox. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that Nintendo Direct Mini, want to talk about that. So we'll walk through the games, share my thoughts on that, because there's some exciting news from there. At least I think so. But before we get into that, let's talk about the games that we're playing. And as always, remember to write in and let me know what games you've been playing, because it's so cool to see what you all are playing out there. Now, as for me, I've been continuing Dying Light 2, so I've talked about this, but I was cruising through the main story. As I mentioned, I kind of just wanted to finish this game up. I'm tired, I just want to see it through and call it, be done with it. And I gotta say, the main story was getting a little more interesting. Some character development happened, and I was like, okay, this is getting cool. I want to see this through. But I encountered the fast travel bug in this game. So apparently, there's this bug out there where throughout the game you can fast travel between these metro stations and some of the main camps. And there's a bug out there where it'll say cannot fast travel during quest. And at first I was like, what? Maybe I tried deselecting a quest or something, and it doesn't make sense why, if I'm selecting a quest, why I wouldn't be able to fast travel. And I was like, that is the worst. At first I was thinking this is the worst design decision I've ever seen in my life. But after looking it up, because I was getting frustrated, I discovered that it's actually a bug in the game and has yet to be fixed from Techland. So I was pretty frustrated with that, and I think a lot of other people were. And the thing with Dying Light 2 is there's actually a couple different areas. There's the first kind of open area in which you go to, and then you kind of travel through this non-area to get to the second area, which is like the main city. And as I understand it, it's hard to go back without fast travel. And the main mission that I was on required me to go back to that original area, but I can't fast travel. And I'm like, what? This is so stupid. This is so stupid. How have they not fixed this? It's been 4.5 months, almost 5 months with this game, and they still haven't fixed this issue. It is infuriating. And I thought to myself, though, why am I wasting so much effort and time with this game if it's broken? Why am I playing a broken game? Why should I give this game the time of day? And so I put it down. I was like, you know what? If you're not going to fix your game, I'm not going to play it. And that's unfortunate because I love Dying Light 1. And Dying Light 2, while from what I've played, it doesn't even hold a candle, in my opinion, to the first game. There's still some fun moments to be had in there. And I really did want to see where the story went. Because if the story finishes strong, then okay, yeah, it's a decent entry. But you're not going to fix your game, and make it, very difficult to play. Because yes, part of the game is kind of going from point A to point B and parkouring and traversing. But when it's a really long ways away and it's very difficult to get between these kind of big open sections you have in the game, and it's meant to be fast traveled, nah, bro, I'm not going to do that. So I put it down. I'll wait. I'll give it a couple weeks or so. Wait to see if a patch ever comes out to fix that issue, because it's like I literally can't play it. So whatever. I'm moving on. Sorry, Techland. I think that's unacceptable, and I'm very disappointed in that. So after that, I was kind of thinking about, okay, what game do I want to play next? And that's when I decided to finally jump into A Plague Tale: Innocence. So I started this game by playing the PS5 version, and that version I think was free on PS Plus, I want to say sometime last year. So if you're an avid PS Plus subscriber that picks up the games every month, you probably have it in your library. I'm about, I want to say 4 to 5 hours in. I don't know what my game clock is specifically, but I'm thinking about 4 to 5 hours in. I'm on chapter 6, and I think there's 17 chapters, give or take. And the first thing I got to say about this game is it definitely feels like a AA game. It's a beautiful game. I think the PS5 version, it looks good. It runs well. I think the character models are done very well. Environments, it's a good looking game, I would say. I haven't experienced really any major bugs or any kind of frame rate drops or anything like that. But the controls are stiff and clunky. Like the way you move the camera isn't super smooth. It just feels very stiff. The characters feel very stiff, and then the kind of light combat that you get into with the game also feels a little slow and kind of stiff, and just there's a little bit of jank to it. But that's okay because it is a slower paced game, so it doesn't really hinder the experience too much. So I can let it go. It's not the biggest deal in the world. But I like it so far. It's very stealth oriented in terms of you kind of, sneaking around, trying to get by enemies. And, the kind of premise is, there's some series of events happen, and then you got to, protect your brother, and there's someone kind of hunting him down, and you go on this adventure. And I got to say, I'm intrigued by the story because there's something more to it than just that premise. And there's obviously kind of the backdrop of this plague with these rats that's going on. And so I'm kind of intrigued to see where that plays out and why they're looking for her brother. What's so important about him? So I'm kind of intrigued in that regard, and I definitely want to see how all that kind of plays out. I do have a feeling though the gameplay will get old if this game overstays its welcome. I believe this game is approximately 12 hours or so, and I could see the formula, if nothing is kind of introduced to change it up, will get a little old in terms of being just repetitive, kind of using the same tactics and mechanics to sneak by enemies, to fight your enemies, etc. So we'll see how that goes as time goes on, but I'm enjoying it so far. I really am, and I like the setting because I believe it's set in kind of medieval France, if you will, and there's a little bit of grit to it, which I kind of like, and there's a little bit of kind of that old school religion vibes I get from it. So I don't know. I like it. I like the aesthetic, and I want to see it through. So I'm enjoying it. And I wanted to play this game too because the sequel is coming out later this year, and there seems to be some hype around that. I think a lot of people have enjoyed this first game, so I was like, I think it's time for me to actually play this to see if the sequel is something I want to dive into. Now, there's another game here. I haven't jumped into it yet, but once we go through the Nintendo Direct, I plan to dive into it, and that's the Live a Live demo that just dropped out on the eShop. And actually, I'm kind of, is it Live Alive? Is that how you actually say that? Because I'm pretty sure that's how they said that in the Nintendo Direct. And I've been saying it wrong this entire time, but in my opinion, Live a Live just sounds better. So I'm going to continue to say it like that. So now, let's dive into that Nintendo Direct news. So on this past Tuesday, which is yesterday for me, but almost a week ago by the time you hear this podcast, Nintendo put out a Direct Mini. That's what they called it, Nintendo Direct Mini. And it was about 26 minutes long, just a video they put up on their YouTube channels, showing updates from third-party devs. And so it was their mini partner showcase. And it's funny because I hear mini in the title, like they position it as Nintendo Direct Mini. And I'm thinking, okay, mini, that'll be short, just a few updates from some third-party games. Great. But it was like 26 minutes long. It was 30 minutes. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem mini to me. But when I sat down and watched it, it actually went by pretty quick because it's pretty jam-packed. And so it really didn't feel like 26 minutes had flown by when all things were said and done. So anyway, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of funny. So what I want to do here is go through each of the games that they announced, share some thoughts on them, and then kind of, as we typically do, share my thoughts on the overall showcase. Because, as I mentioned before, people are going to have ungodly expectations for these things, have crazy wish lists, and also just say stupid stuff for clout. So remember that not every game is going to be for you, and that's okay. But let's look at it as objectively as possible and go through the games. So they open the showcase with the trailer for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, which actually it'll be out by the time this podcast goes up, but it comes out time I'm recording tomorrow on June 30th. And every time I see this, it just looks awesome. this really does seem like a massive expansion, and I'm pretty sure it is. I think I've read or heard somewhere that it's as big, if not bigger, than the original game, which is pretty insane if you think about it. That's a lot of content, but it just looks good. And it's, man, I've tried so hard to get into Monster Hunter with the last two entries, Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise. And I want to like these games so much because they look so cool, and I know there's a lot of depth to them. There's a lot to learn and do, and I always just fall out of them. Like, I put a good number of hours in Monster Hunter Worlds, albeit I came into that game kind of late, a year, I want to say a year later into that game. But it was awesome, and it was very accessible, I think, from a Monster Hunter game, which was, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't want to jump into those games, myself included. They streamlined that a little bit. And then I told myself when Monster Hunter Rise comes out, I'm going to come in hard on day one. And I did play it for quite a bit, but I always just kind of fall off. And I don't know what it is, but I do want to get back to this game at some point. But it looks awesome. That new Sunbreak expansion looks really, really cool. They also talked about their kind of roadmap for the next year in terms of seasonal content. And so the Seething Basilgeese, I think is how you say that, update is coming in August. That's the first one. And there's a demo for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak that's out now if you want to check that out. After that, they moved on to Nier Automata, which is coming to Switch on October 6th. This game is awesome. I played it on the PlayStation 4 years ago when it came out. I've never been a big Nier fan, but I know a lot of people are talking about this game, and it's great. It really is awesome. Like, the combat, I think, is fun. The story is really interesting. There's some depth there if you're looking for that, into kind of this, moralistic, almost theological kind of issues. So it's good. It's really good, and it's one of those games, because the thing about the game is you play it multiple times, but from different perspectives. And I wasn't sure that I'd like that, because I don't like playing games multiple times due to repetition. I don't like doing repetitive things on most games, but they changed it up enough with the different perspectives that it's like, okay, it wasn't too bad, and it was kind of cool to see things from different perspectives and see how the story would play out. So that game's coming to Switch, which is pretty cool. So if you haven't played it, definitely play it on whatever platform you're on. Then they showed this game called Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and this is, as they described it, a modern take on puzzle adventure games. I don't really have much to say about it. It looks interesting, but I don't know that it's really a game for me. That comes out sometime next year in 2023. And then after that, they showed off Super Bomberman R2, so the sequel to that Super Bomberman game that I think was a Switch launch title, if I remember correctly. And the cool thing with this one is I think there's a new multiplayer mode. It's kind of like asymmetrical, like one player versus multiple other players, where you're kind of taking each other out. That kind of sounded pretty cool. And then you can also create and share stages, which I think that is cool and probably long overdue for this game and franchise. This comes out sometime next year in 2023. And I got to say, I got a soft spot for Bomberman. I really do. I remember when they announced Super Bomberman R for Switch, I was like, yes, I've got to play this game, because my love for Bomberman comes from Super Bomberman on the Super Nintendo, and I used to play the crap out of that game through the main story, and I think I played a little bit of multiplayer, like, split screen multiplayer on that as well with some friends, if I remember correctly. That's a long time ago, but I loved that game, and I don't know, because I have, I guess, nostalgia for Super Bomberman. This game really excites me. Now, Super Bomberman R wasn't that great of a game. I played through kind of the main little story they had. Played a little bit of multiplayer, and it's fun, but it's nothing that's gonna knock your socks off, so to speak. But I don't know, man. I got a soft spot and some nostalgia for Bomberman. So Super Bomberman sequel, yeah, sign me up. And then they have the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. There's 10 of these games. I guess they were originally for Game Boy. I don't know too much about these games. I remember hearing about them, never played them, but that collection is coming out which is pretty cool. I guess they're like tactic style games, so that's kind of neat. I think they're very very unique games, especially in the Mega Man universe. So if you liked those games back in the day, you can look forward to that collection. And then Pac-Man World Remake, which is a 3D platformer starring Pac-Man himself, where he goes to save his family. This game actually looks kind of cool. I never played the original, so I don't know. It's got those old school 3D platformer vibes, and it's got Pac-Man, and so obviously there's some of those Pac-Man kind of aesthetics and mechanics in there. Eating the little dots and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think it looks kind of neat. It might be a game to try out when that comes out. And that comes out August 26th. And then they showed off a puzzle platformer game called Blanc, which is a kind of a really cute looking game. They said it's a text-free story. Looks kind of very immersive. Very interesting art style where you're playing these like two animals and you kind of go on this adventure and do, puzzle platforming and stuff like that. This comes out February 2023, and it is a console exclusive for the Switch. And I gotta say, I don't know, keep my eye on this one because it just looks like kind of maybe one of those very cute and potentially emotional games. I don't know. It also kind of reminded me of games like Flower or Journey or Abzu, if you've ever played any of those games. So I don't know. Might be something to keep your eye on. So check it out. It's called Blanc, Blanc. And then after that, they showed off a game called Return to Monkey Island. So I think this is a sequel to the Monkey Island series, which I've never played those games. I think they're out on the 360. Obviously, I think they were originally PC games, if I'm not mistaken. But I gotta say, I love the art style here. This is coming this year sometime. So if you're into Monkey Island, you can look forward to that game. And then we got into a big one, Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope. And I gotta say, I am very much looking forward to this game. I'm super excited for it. So one of the things they showed off with this is that the way they've kind of changed the battle mechanics. And so the first Mario and Rabbids is very traditional in its kind of grid style, turn-based tactics combat. Whereas now in the sequel, they've kind of moved away from the grids into kind of this radius, an area in which your character can freely move about. So you're not necessarily moving kind of squares, you're moving freely within this, given radius based on how far your character can move. And you can do whatever, you can run around. And so freely range within that range. And so in the trailer, they're kind of showing off, okay, it's Mario's turn and he'll go freely and he'll run up to a character, knock him over, hide behind him, and then shoot him, and then kind of run back or whatever. I don't know. There just seems like there's more freedom with this new system, and I thought it looked really, really interesting. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I don't know. I'm excited for this game. Just very excited. It comes out October 20th, so we finally have a release date, which is because this game was, I think, originally announced at some point last year, like summer of last year. So it's finally coming out October 20th. October is a really busy month, too. I was looking up releases, and October is just monstrous. Okay, one second here. Just look at some of the games that are coming out. So let's see. For October, so you have Overwatch 2, which that's a pretty big one. Forspoken, that PS5 exclusive. Gotham Knights, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, which is I think is going to be just enormous. Resident Evil Reverse, and then now Mario and Rabbids. I think there's also another horror game or two coming out, like Layers of Fears, if I remember. No, that's 2023. There's some other horror game I think coming out that I can't remember, but that's a pretty massive lineup. So October's looking jam-packed, I got to say. But yeah, Mario and Rabbids is fantastic. Now, if you haven't played the first Mario and Rabbids, dude, you have to play that game. It is probably, in my opinion, it's one of the best games on the Switch. And I think that's saying something because the Switch has a ton of bangers on that platform. I mean, obviously you got the likes of Zelda, Mario Odyssey, there, some big ones like Luigi's Mansion, some of the Wii U ports that are really good games like Super Mario Deluxe, 3D World, Skyward Sword if you're interested in that. It's got Astral Chain, obviously. Monster Hunter Rise, I think, is a big one. Obviously, Animal Crossing, that's a huge one as well. But Mario and Rabbids is just amazing. I think it's one of those just sleeper hits on that platform that I don't think anyone saw was going to be as good as it is. And it's genuinely a really good game. And it's funny because I never thought of myself as someone that would really enjoy and like tactic games, but I'm a fan, I guess. Like I mentioned it before. I love Valkyria Chronicles. That's kind of a tactics strategy game. And Mario and Rabbids is kind of in that same vein, although it's a little lighter than, let's say the likes of like an XCOM or something like that. But it's fun. And it's accessible too. So it's not overly complex. And it kind of, as you progress through the game, it gets a little bit more difficult. You kind of got to change up your strategies and stuff like that. And it's just, it's one of those games that doesn't have a right to be as good as it is, but it is, and it works. It's funny because you wouldn't think Mario and Rabbids. It's such a crazy pairing, but it works, and it works really well. Now, I never got to that Donkey Kong DLC that they put in the game. I'd love to get to that at some point. I've just been putting it off for years. But dude, Mario and Rabbids is so good. I think you can pick up the game for like $15 or less. So pick it up, man, and try it out. It's fantastic. And I am very much looking forward to the sequel on October 20th. After that, they showed off a game called Little Noah, Scion of Paradise. Kind of has this chibi art style. And, I don't really have much more to say about the game. That game is out today, so it's available right now if you want to go check that out. Then a management sim with trains game called Railgrade comes out this fall. So if you're into those style of games, you have that to look forward to. And then this game called Legend of Right, which is basically a puzzle-solving game where you kind of draw and erase things and stuff like that. I don't know, kind of interesting, I gotta say. That comes out August 18th. Then they showed a little bit of Sonic Frontiers. This is the open-world Sonic game, comes out this holiday. And, I've never been the biggest Sonic fan. It's been cool to see Sonic come back and have relevance, primarily due to the movies, I think. But I don't know, this game looks interesting. It looks like it could work with this open world Sonic. I gotta say though, every time I see this game, the open world just looks so empty. And there's like not much to do and explore. And I know you kind of go to these portals to kind of these other worlds and stuff like that. And that's a big part of the game, but I don't know. I just kind of get the vibe that the world is empty. We'll see when the game finally comes out, but I don't know. Those are just kind of the vibes I'm getting. Then they showed off this really interesting game with Disney called Disney Dreamlight Valley. And it's basically, at least the way I perceived it, is it's a little bit of Harvest Moon in that you kind of manage the town, you go around helping various Disney characters, and just kind of go around doing that type of stuff. And a little bit of sim management, lifestyle stuff where you're helping these Disney characters. This comes out September 6th, and they mentioned it's an early access title. So I thought that was really interesting. So I'm kind of be curious to kind of watch that one and see how it does. But I don't know, if you like Disney or like those style of games, it might be something for you. And then they got in my game, Live a Live, or as they say, Live Alive, where obviously showed a little trailer, talked about the game coming out at, what is it, July 21st, I believe. So very much looking forward to that. But they dropped the demo. So the first 3 chapters are available today or now as you're listening to this podcast. And so I'm excited about that. I downloaded them. I've got it ready on my Switch. I'm going to bring it with me on my trip. And I'm very much looking forward to at least diving into one of the chapters just to see if it's going to live up to the hype that I've set for myself on this game. Because I'm very much looking forward to it. I don't know. I just feel like it's going to just hit that sweet spot that I've been looking for with that kind of old school JRPG style of game. So we shall see. Then they showed off Doraemon, Story of Seasons. This is a farming game coming this year. They showed off a trailer for Minecraft Legends. We know that's coming out 2023. And then they showed off Dragon Quest Treasures, which is coming to the Switch. And this game actually looks kind of interesting in the sense that you recruit monsters. Obviously, you're hunting for treasure. It's a very cute looking game. Seems like it could be fun. I kind of like the idea of, collecting in monsters, Pokemon style, but then you're also kind of literally going out and searching for treasure, battling and stuff like that. Seems like it could be fun. I'm interested in it. We'll see when it comes out on December 9th. Then they showed just this kind of montage of games: Fire Emblem Warriors, No Man's Sky, A Plague Tale Requiem, which is the cloud version, and this game called Captain Velvet Meteor. I don't know, something like that. Then a trailer for Portal Companion Collection, which comes out later today. And every time I see this game coming to Switch, it just reminds me of how good those games are. I played Portal 1 and 2 back on the 360, and they're just fantastic games, especially Portal 2. I loved that game. I genuinely loved that game. It's one of my favorite games on the 360. So it's very cool to see those games come back and be available on the Switch. And then they showed off a game called Harvestella, which is a life sim RPG. You do farming, cooking, crafting. You can battle monsters, meet townsfolk. It reminded me of like a fantasy game that meets Harvest Moon. It looks kind of interesting. So maybe not really a game for me, but it does look interesting. This comes out November 4th. And then they closed the show with the announcement that the Persona games are indeed coming to Switch. And I guess there was concern out there that they were announced for PlayStation 5, but not officially for Switch. Persona 5 Royal, Persona 3 Golden, or Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 3 Portable. But now they are officially also coming to Switch, which is exciting. And I think it is long overdue, because Persona Strikers came to Switch, and that's one of those games that you should play Persona 5 before you jump into that. So that's really exciting for Nintendo's fans out there. Now, overall, I thought this was a really solid showcase. I thought there's a lot of games here, a lot of different games for a lot of different folks out there. I mean, obviously, I'm looking forward to, I mentioned Super Mario Man. The number one game on here is Mario & Rabbids. There's a couple other ones, though. Like that Pac-Man game looks like it could be fun. Obviously, Live Alive looks amazing. Dragon Quest Treasures, I think, looks pretty cool. So there's some good games in here. A lot to look forward to from the third party. Some solid third party support from Nintendo's partners. And I thought it was a really good showcase. I don't know. And I don't know what people are expecting from third. This is, again, they mentioned in preface, third party showcase from their partners. So some good games, I think, coming to the Switch. But of course, let me know what you thought about the showcase and what was your favorite game from the showcase down in the comments below of the podcast or on YouTube. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the main topic of the show, which is about cloud and handheld gaming as we move into the future. So I came across an article a couple weeks ago about Microsoft's Project Keystone. And for those of you that don't know what that is, Project Keystone is basically this low-cost streaming stick that's essentially designed to bring Game Pass and Xbox to new platforms and kind of cut out the console itself, to where this little stick, you'd plug it into your TV or monitor. Now you have access to Xbox games through Game Pass. So it's like a Roku, a little small, like a Roku stick or the Amazon Fire Stick that you just plug in your TV. And then you can take a controller, connect it, and you are good to go. Just jump right into games. And so I found an article on Gizmodo that states that a Microsoft spokesperson reiterated that they still have the intentions on the project, but the concept needed to be completely scrapped. And so he stated, and I quote, "Our vision for Xbox cloud gaming is unwavering. Our goal is to enable people to play the games they want on the devices they want, anywhere they want. As announced last year, we've been working on a game streaming device, codenamed Keystone, that could be connected to any TV or monitor without the need for a console. Ellipsis. As part of any technical journey, we are constantly evaluating our efforts, reviewing our learnings, and ensuring we are bringing value to our customers. We have made the decision to pivot away from the current iteration of the Keystone device. We will take our learnings and refocus our efforts on a new approach that will allow us to deliver Xbox cloud gaming to more players around the world in the future. End quote. So it seems like maybe something wasn't working with the device, or it just wasn't up to their standards, or maybe it was too complex to get it to be working consistently. I don't know, but they're kind of got to go back to the drawing board and see what device that they can kind of come up with. And I got to say, I think this is an interesting future, and one that I've kind of foreseen for a number of years as we've kind of seen the launch and rise of Xbox Game Pass. For a while, I think it's been pretty clear what Xbox's long-term goals are. And I figured that these goals are very apparent, especially when you talk about the launch of the current gen consoles with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Because if you look at the two platforms and their strategies and the way they marketed themselves, I thought it was pretty clear in the direction that these two companies were going. So with Xbox, you saw the focus on Game Pass and backwards compatibility. That's how they touted the Xbox Series X. It's powerful hardware, gives you access to Game Pass. You have backwards compatibility with all of their, previous generation games. Not all of the games, but you get what I'm saying. But the thing is, they didn't really have much of a launch lineup. I think the Medium was coming out shortly after the release, like a couple months later. They had, support from third-party devs, like Assassin's Creed Valhalla was pretty big, I think, on the Series X and stuff like that. But there wasn't like any major launch titles that really would sell the game, at least in my opinion. I don't think, and looking back, I don't even think they really had first-party launch games. Now, we all know Halo Infinite was supposed to be that, but that game obviously had some troubles. And in my opinion, with the Xbox Series X as it was coming to launch, there really wasn't much of a reason outside of kind of playing your older games and having them upscaled to own one. Like, that's it. That's all I'm getting. Then that's not really a reason to buy this new console. Now, on the PlayStation side, they focused on generations. The famous quote, they believe in generations. Though they kind of backtracked that, and I think Xbox had a lot to do with that in terms of backwards compatibility and stuff like that. But they had a very traditional approach in the sense that they're going to have a strong launch lineup. They're going to have exclusives. Basically, a lot of games that you can only play on PlayStation 5, not PlayStation 4, though that line is much blurred than it's been before. And they were taking, that kind of traditional one generation of console to the next generation of consoles approach. And not only did they have a strong lineup of, first party and compelling games, the likes of Miles Morales. I think they had, the PlayStation Plus collection, which is pretty cool to play those games, those PS4, bangers on your PS5, just instant access to that library. Demon's Souls was a big one. Obviously, you had some third-party support as well. And then they also had the new DualSense controller, which that thing is just awesome. Like, it's such a awesome piece of tech. So, very different approaches in the sense that I would, again, to summarize that, Xbox focusing on Game Pass subscriptions and kind of just upscaling and giving you this new platform to play all the games you already know and love. But again, the focus on Game Pass and subscriptions. Whereas PlayStation was a very traditional approach in the sense that, okay, here's a new system, new games you can only play on the system, and we're making this jump over to the next generation of gaming. And so my thought has always been that Xbox wants Game Pass as their platform rather than the Xbox console. That's always been kind of my thought process. That and if you listen to the way they talk about Game Pass, and even in that language, that quote from that exec about Keystone, they want Xbox everywhere. And I believe they're going to do that through Game Pass. Similar, again, it's the Netflix approach, right? you have Netflix on any number of devices, whether it be your phone, your TV, tablet, etc., your Roku device, whatever. It's available everywhere. That's what they want with Game Pass. And I think sometime in the future, that will be your Xbox platform, is Game Pass. You sign into your Xbox account, you have access to the Game Pass library, and then that's how you play your games. That's just, I don't know. And I figured they would also eventually get out of the console manufacturer space because it would probably save them money because they don't have to worry about, putting together these pieces of tech and then, distribution, manufacturing, just all of that stuff that in dealing with your partners, like the retail partners and stuff like that, just kind of getting out of that space. I think to them probably makes a lot of sense. So I think that's the end game. And so with this Keystone project, I think now that they've kind of scrapped it, I think it's regardless of scrapping it and kind of maybe back to the drawing board, I think this is a step towards their goal, in that end goal of getting Game Pass on any and every platform and having that as their platform. But in a way, it's smart because it opens them up to just this plethora of new customers, that people that don't necessarily need an Xbox console to become a Game Pass subscriber or access their ecosystem. And that's kind of a cool thing if you think about it. Now, in addition to Keystone, there was also some news that beginning on June 30th, so by the time this podcast goes live, this will already have happened, and at the time of this recording, that's tomorrow, that Xbox Game Pass is going to be available on Samsung smart TVs. So I think they have a partnership with Samsung to bring the Xbox app and Game Pass directly to the Samsung smart TVs. Gosh, it's pretty early. I can't talk, I guess. And this allows users to basically play cloud games without a console. Just hook your controller up, open the app, and boom, you're playing Xbox cloud games. So we're already kind of seeing this trend, and they're starting to get into that space. And I definitely have to imagine they're working on more partnerships with other TV manufacturers to get this app out there onto those other platforms. But it's starting with Samsung. So with this push towards cloud gaming and them kind of wanting this app on whatever platform, the question is cloud gaming any good? Now, I personally haven't tried it myself. I don't really have much of an interest. But from what I've read and heard, it's actually not that bad. It's gotten better over the months since, Xbox cloud gaming has been introduced. But I think there are two things that kind of stick out to me as it relates to this. It is highly dependent on your internet connection. So you have to have good internet speeds, and a solid connection. Otherwise, you're going to have a terrible time. Second is I still think there's concerns about input lag. That's basically when you push a button on the controller, the time it takes for you to do that and to see it on the screen. It's not one-to-one. There is input lag. It's just a matter of how much. And that's going to vary on depending. If you're playing a very kind of casual, slower paced game, you're probably not going to notice it as much. But if you're playing a very twitch, fast, maybe shooter, you're going to notice that. But I got to say, this does offer some advantages if you want to get into cloud gaming. So you can, the nice thing is you'd be able to hop into a game right away. No downloads or installs. So you don't have to worry about that. You kind of just go in and play. I think that's a big one. And then I think for Microsoft, as I mentioned before, they don't have to worry about hardware. Though I'm thinking about this too, like, is it worth them getting out of the Xbox Marketplace? Because with the Xbox Marketplace on there, when you buy a game from the Marketplace on an Xbox console, they're taking a 30% cut of that. So potentially losing out on that if they have, long-term got out of the console space. But maybe they have a marketplace on the app to where they could still have those available. I don't know. Very interesting stuff to kind of think about and consider. Now, cloud gaming isn't new, right? We've already seen two failed versions of this. We had Google Stadia, and we have Amazon Luna, I think is what it is. Amazon Luna is still around. Google Stadia is dead. And I don't know. After those kind of the two very big giants, right? Amazon and Google getting into this space, I think it's telling because there's obviously something here, right? I just think we have poor executions and really no one cares about these companies. We don't want you in this space, so to speak. With Google, I mean, they just had a bad approach from the get-go, right? You pay a subscription and then you have to buy your games on top of the subscription. No, you're not going to nickel and dime us that way. And you don't even own the games. So you're buying the game, but you don't even actually own it. That's a problem. But outside of that, Nintendo and PlayStation dabble in this space already. So Nintendo has cloud versions of games, like Hitman 3. I think there's a cloud version of Guardians of the Galaxy. The upcoming A Plague Tale Requiem is going to have a cloud version on Nintendo Switch. So they dabble in that space a little bit already. PlayStation also offers game streaming for PS3 games previously on the PlayStation Now, but now with the new PlayStation Plus system, they already offer this. So the other competitors are already kind of in this space. Now, for me, I'm going to be that guy. I'm not really the biggest fan of this. Now, again, I haven't had hands-on experience with it, but I like owning my games, right? And this is going to lead to a world where you don't own games. You're, just like with Netflix and shows and movies, you don't own those games or excuse me, not games. You don't own those shows or movies. You can consume them, but you don't actually own anything. And I like owning my games. Obviously, I've got a nice physical collection of games. There's something satisfying to me still to this day to kind of open up a brand new game and insert the disc. I don't know. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe whatever, but I enjoy owning my games. And then I'm just not the biggest fan of this digital future, especially with DRM. We've seen, I think, it was a month or so ago where Xbox was down for some reason, and because a lot of those games have DRM, like Forza, I think it was, you can't even play that game because you can't do the DRM check. Even if you own the game, you can't play it. So there's just some issues with a kind of digital DRM based future, and having a reliance on a service to play and access your games. If that service is gone or goes away or is down, then you have nothing and you're paying for nothing. So just some food for thought, at least kind of my perspective on that. The other side of that is I also like having a dedicated console. One of the reasons I love console gaming as opposed to PC gaming is because it's simple. It works. You turn it on, you pop your game in and you play. It works. Now, obviously there's, not every game has the same level of performance, right? But I don't have to worry about drivers. I don't have to worry about is my PC or my hardware strong enough to play the game, different settings. I just don't have to worry about that stuff. I just play. That's what I want to do. That's I love the simplicity of it and having that dedicated platform to do it. And the last thing, unless you're playing a multiplayer game, is you rarely have to worry about your internet connection. You can go to the store and you're connected to the internet, but if you're just playing single player games, like I mostly do personally, I don't have to worry about my internet connection. It's not a big deal. And the thing is with multiplayer games, obviously you have to worry about your connection to, for a multiplayer game, but if you're streaming a multiplayer game, not only have to worry about your connection to multiplayer, but then the streaming of the game itself. I feel like there's two factors at work here with your internet connection that could go wrong. So that's kind of where I'm coming from as it relates to cloud gaming. Now, if it ever gets to the point where cloud gaming is kind of on par with regular console gaming, then again, I could see the appeal and maybe we'll get there, but I just don't think we're there yet, because you also have to worry about download speeds, wireless connections, and I think the big one that no one really talks about is data caps. I'm not sure what data caps are in various parts of, here in the States or around the world, but I know they exist. And when you think about streaming things, that's going to eat up your data cap, especially if you're talking about 4K 60 FPS games. I have to imagine that's going to eat up through data, and that's going to be a concern. And I think there's already folks that have a lot of concern when it comes to digital games about and even updates to these games, because updates are, a couple gigs at a time sometimes, that just eats up their, kind of monthly allotment of data. And that's already an issue. And I think that's why some people in parts of the world still like physical games, because they can, even though, yes, you have to install and kind of download some of these updates, it helps with their data cap usage. So I think that's another factor to kind of take into consideration with this. Now, with all this said about Xbox cloud gaming, I have seen some rumors floating out there. And again, take this with a grain of salt, because I haven't really seen any concrete confirmation or articles about it. But there's this idea out there that Xbox is working on a handheld console that would stream games. So take it with a grain of salt. And keep in mind that these are just rumors, and in all likely, probably someone just looking for clout. But my question to that is that something that folks want? Like, would you want a dedicated Xbox handheld to stream cloud games? I mean, you could technically already do that with your phone. I don't know. And it's kind of got me thinking about the handheld space in general. Because as of right now, Nintendo doesn't really have any competition outside of maybe mobile gaming. Now, I know the Steam Deck has just recently come out, and it seems like a lot of people are really enjoying it and liking it, but I'm curious about the longevity of that platform. I kind of feel like it's just a fad, and we'll see if Valve continues to support it, maybe with additional iterations, or how it'll go into the future with the Steam Deck. But outside of that, I mean, just Nintendo's in a league of its own when it comes to handheld gaming, because they have the hybrid, handheld and, plugs into your TV type of system. And they're just dominating it. Now, I think there's other factors here in why the Switch is so dominant. Obviously, they have a stellar first-party lineup. I mean, they've got killer first-party games. They have strong third-party support, not only from indie devs, but bigger publishers and developer partners. I think it has a great form factor in terms of the size, a little bit of ergonomics. And I mean, you talk about the Switch Lite, I mean, that thing's even smaller, and it's just great, easy to carry and travel with. I mentioned the lack of competition, but I also think they're riding the success off of the DS and 3DS, which were pretty massive for Nintendo, and I think a lot of folks had those platforms. So a lot to kind of consider when you talk about Nintendo and its success in the handheld market. But there's no one else entering this space. And so it's interesting to kind of think about the idea of Microsoft entering that space with its own dedicated handheld and being able to offer Game Pass and cloud gaming with their platform. Could stir things up a little bit. Now, one of the things in kind of thinking about handhelds, I was curious about lifetime console sales for handheld games. And so I pulled, I think it was off VG Charts as of, I think, April 2022, in terms of lifetime sales for these platforms. So in descending order, top of the list is Nintendo DS at 154.9 million units. That's insane. That is a lot. That's not the most of any platform. That's the most of any handheld platform, but that's a lot of DSs. Then after that is Game Boy, which I didn't realize this, at 118.7 million if you round up there. Then Nintendo Switch at 109.25 million. Game Boy Advance at 81.5 million. Then the PSP at 80.79 million. Then the Nintendo 3DS at about 76 million. The Vita, I mean, this is a big drop off. Vita at 15.8 million. And then Game Gear, if anyone remembers that, loved my Game Gear back in the day, at 10.62 million. And it's crazy. I mean, let's see, the top 1, 2, 3, 4 are all Nintendo. They've just been dominant in this space with very little competition. The PSP, I think, did pretty well and got up there. But man, the Vita, The Vita was so ahead of its time and is such a wonderful handheld that, I don't know, I think because Sony abandoned it, that everyone else abandoned it as well. So it's kind of unfortunate when you talk about the Vita. But I mean, with those numbers, I feel like there's this demand for handheld gaming, especially when you see the success of Nintendo Switch. And I think when you talk to people, a lot of people look at their Switch as their handheld gaming device. And I think a lot of dedicated gamers feel this way. Now, I know there's mobile gaming out there, and that certainly offers a huge market of consumers, but the mobile gaming space is awful. It is just atrocious. Like, just look out there. It's gross. And I found this article about mobile gaming, and they offered, some reasons why it's, not necessarily a good market. And I thought they kind of hit the nail on the head with a few of these points. So a couple of them I took for that is mobile games don't sell well. That's one of the items they put on there. And they state that people don't want to pay for them and would just rather pay microtransactions. And they actually have an interesting statistic in here, in that they said, let's see. Here we go. I'll quote the article here. This is from makeuseof.com, titled 6 Reasons Why Mobile Gaming Actually Sucks. So, quote, one big difference between console gaming and mobile gaming is their business model. While the former comes with an upfront cost, the freemium model dominates the latter. According to a Statista.com report, only about 3% of all mobile games on the Google Play Store carry a fee. Similar is the case with the Apple Store, end quote. And so with that, when you kind of think about that, if you're going to make a mobile game, it kind of puts developers into this position to where they're either forced to conform to a freemium model or maybe just go into console gaming. But if you move to console gaming, that's going to increase your costs dramatically. So it's kind of an interesting position and interesting take. But yeah, people don't want to pay for mobile games. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. And I think we're starting to see, and I'm not going to get into this too much, but I think we're starting to see this in the console gaming space. Thanks to Game Pass, it's changing the customer's perception of the value of video games. People don't want to pay for games. And when people don't want to pay for games, look what you get in the mobile space. Just saying. Now, another thing they pointed out is low consumer expectations. So essentially what they're saying here is that people go into mobile games with very low expectations. They expect them to be bad and stupid and horrible games. And if they are, then they just delete them or they move on with their lives. And this kind of hurts the mobile space because there's lack of a feedback loop, because there's less engagement. People aren't inclined to say, hey, your game sucks or you need to fix this in the mobile gaming space, whereas we see that constantly in the console gaming space. I thought that was a really interesting point. And then obviously, touchscreen controls suck. Now I know there's like the Razorback, controller adapters, the Switch-like thing, which you can put on the ends of your phone and have buttons and stuff like that. I know you can use, Xbox or PlayStation controller with your phone to play games that way, but touchscreen sucks, man. Now, for me, I'd love to see another Sony handheld. I mentioned I had a PSP back in the day, which was awesome. I still have it, though I'm sure many of you out there, my battery kind of exploded. But I had the awesome God of War, the red PSP. It's pretty dope. But I also have a Vita, and I love that. And one of the things I loved about the Vita was the remote play feature. I actually played a lot of Persona 5 that way, just streaming it from my PS4 to my Vita, because it's just a chill game and you can kind of play it that way. It worked really well. And yeah, there's hiccups with that, but it was awesome. It was really, really great. And, I think it's one of those things, if you talk about more powerful handheld consoles and maybe getting to the point where you can get maybe PlayStation 4 quality games in handheld form, I think that's awesome. And I think there's a market in demand for that. So I think if you can kind of solve the battery life problems, because if you're getting that much power, it's going to drain the shit out of those batteries. But if you can solve the battery lineup, I think if you have solid support, good lineup of games, not only from first party, but from third party developers as well, that you have kind of a recipe for success, because I think people are hungry out there. And people love both Xbox and PlayStation franchises. They love those IPs. Especially, I mean, with the Xbox side, I mean, you think about, yes, you can do this with Steam Deck, but you think about, Halo, Gears of War, having those style of those caliber of games, at least from the 360 area, on the go. That's cool. That's really compelling. And then, or games like Forza, stuff like that. And then obviously, with having some of those Bethesda games, they have quite a few franchises and a good lineup that I think a lot of people would love to see in handheld factor. And then PlayStation, obviously there's tons of franchises that people would love to see, and would love to see come back, like Resistance, Killzone. There was handheld versions of those, another, maybe a handheld Uncharted like they had with Golden Abyss, and maybe bring in, a Spider-Man game or something like that, or Ratchet and Clank, stuff like that. I don't know. There's lots of franchises that people would love to see. And I also love the idea of the ability to play a virtual console. So you can play, think about like being able to play and access, especially with the new PlayStation Plus subscription, PS1, PS2, PSP, and Vita games on your new handheld device. I love that idea. And I think a lot of people would love that as well. Or even having access to the original Xbox games on this, dedicated Xbox handheld. So I certainly think there's a market out there. I certainly think there's a demand for it. I'd love it to see it go more the traditional handheld route rather than cloud gaming, but I have a feeling we're going to kind of see a shift more towards cloud gaming, especially on the Xbox side, because, that's their long-term goals there. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about handheld gaming, cloud gaming, and this kind of future that we see ourselves kind of heading towards in this space. That's all I got for you guys today. I went on a little bit longer. I thought this would be a shorter episode, but we went on about an hour. So pretty good, I'd say. But let me know what you guys think about this. Drop a comment, hit me up on Twitter or on Locals. Remember, the best way to support the show is leave us a nice rating so I can get in the algorithms. People can find the show. Share it with your friends as well. That's always helps out. Drop them a link to the podcast. Share it. You can do it through various podcast apps, through Podbeam, iTunes, Spotify, you name it. You can share the podcast that way. As always, I appreciate your love, kindness, and support. Happy 4th of July. Stay safe out there. And until next time, I'm Bodfire, and I will see you online.